Well, good morning, everybody. Here on Friday, I just want to kind of load you up with some good content over the weekend to think about, including some new long-range information that we're going to get to at the end of this from the Climate Prediction Center. We're going to ask why some of the long-range forecast looks the way it does and try to assess how much of that's related to La Niña. But in the near term, we're watching a few things. You're just looking at a radar animation from late last night through early this morning. We watched a pretty deep low curl up here into parts of Ontario, and I was corrected. I appreciate that. Apparently, you referred to this area as southwestern Ontario. That makes a lot of sense. I guess this would be northwestern Ontario. And we can see where that low is curling through here. And the frontal boundary that's going to drape right into this area and meet up with the deeper low that was here over California. And the two are going to kind of get the flow going like this down here in parts of the southwest, stretching that frontal boundary out. Now, after this pattern evolves, this low is going to end up coming right over the top of that boundary, bringing in rainfall to the central United States. And for many, this is absolutely critical rainfall at this point in the season. We'll take a look at how much in a few moments. In the Northeast, still some remnant rain and cloud cover from this earlier week's tropical system that moved into the Carolinas. And we're going to be talking about some colder air, much colder air that's coming in this weekend into parts of Montana. And we need to have another discussion about frost risk, given that we're approaching October. But yesterday, just look at the satellite data as that low curled up here out of Manitoba into Ontario. It was pretty deep low, and some pretty large storms blew up here. We had 3 reports of tornadoes, a lot of report of hail out of this, and this kind of tail end of this frontal boundary right down here, also producing some bigger storms. And the storm reports yesterday kind of show those two areas. We had 44 reports, including 3 tornadoes, but some hail and straight line wind damage from yesterday's storms that went through here. Now that kind of gets us to add up the last 7 days of hail. Several of these storms first in the high western plains, then in the northern plains, and now here moving into the upper Midwest were hailers. We can also see some smaller hail out of the storms that were in the central plains all the way down to parts of New Mexico. Remember, that first blue shade is about pea-size hail, so 1/4 inch, very small. And we're just looking out for any hail at this time of year because it can do quite a bit of damage on a crop that is drying down. If we have a look at one other thing, I thought this was kind of neat last night. I was just watching the satellite data. We can see some wildfire smoke here, but there were several very fast-moving upper-level bands of clouds, like this one that went right over the top of the Four Corners states. That was ejecting around the base of this broader trough that's just living in California right now, one that produced some snow here in the Sierra Nevada. And I was also watch the flow early this morning. So see this cloud here? This is deep in the atmosphere. You can see how long of a shadow it's casting. Very high, thin cloud, but it is really moving, indicating more of that flow pouring out of the Gulf of Alaska, which remember, all of this started in the Bering Sea. We've dominated the month of September with that positive WPO signal, all right? And with some of that colder air that's come through, I just wanted to show you in the last 72 hours. Now, this was through 7 p.m. last night, Central Time. But the models did a pretty good job of picking up on where the snow has been. So remember, some in the Sierra Nevada, some in Central Nevada, and then here in the Rocky Mountains, very near Yellowstone. Now, we will be getting some snow in the Colorado Rockies coming up, but we're going to get to where that cold air is going to come from in just a few moments. I wanted just to walk back over let's get an update on this. There we go, through 6 a.m., the last 72 hours of total accumulated precipitation as well, to show that this storm system did fill in some places here in Montana that were maybe missed by the previous system. This brought some heavier rains into the Canadian prairie, but more more scattered across much of the northern plains of the United States. A little bit more coverage down here in the southern plains. Well, early this morning, this is trying to move its way through like Illinois, and we could grab some moisture out of this in this part of the central and eastern Corn Belt where it is desperately needed here. But if we look at how, we did this yesterday, but if we look at how dry it's been where that moisture is coming through, we needed a lot more. There's a large corridor starting from Texas, New Mexico, through parts of Oklahoma, into eastern Kansas, Missouri, Illinois, Indiana, a lot of the eastern Corn Belt, a lot of the upper Midwest. That's been extremely dry. We also took note of this corridor right in through here that missed out on Francine, which kind of went in that direction. And then the tropical system, remember it was called potential tropical cyclone number 8, that went like this, and we weren't able to get a lot of that moisture into the northeast as well. Back into the southwest, even though we've seen deep lows sitting and spinning here, bringing some cloud cover and some moisture still overall through yesterday morning, because remember, these maps always have a one-day lag on them. quite dry in the southwestern United States. And we can add on to that, like we did yesterday, the look back over the last 30 days, just to show, I think why our drought monitor looks the way it does right now. In fact, let's go have a quick look at the newest drought monitor. This is their newest map, and it continued to show expansion. And if we just look, we can do a couple of things. Let's go down here and go to the change maps. And I would like to look at it. Let's do it over an 8-week time period. There we are. So over the last 8 weeks, we get a pretty clear view here of this larger area we just highlighted, showing multiple stages of degradation and drought. And if we go to the time series, let's have a look at this real fast. Let's zoom in on the very end. We've got 70% of the country in D0 to D4, so that would be abnormally dry to exceptional drought. And then we have 35.59% that are in moderate to exceptional drought. So that's really changed quite a bit. And I've been concerned about the soil moisture issue. And I think you know why. So much of the Missouri Basin, the Mississippi Basin, and the Ohio Basin, including the Great Lakes, have been so low on soil moisture that if this doesn't change much between now and mid to late December, a lot of this will be lingering, waiting for us till next spring, putting a lot of pressure on spring rains to revive fall soil moisture deficits. Now, spring rains can do that, right? But it takes tremendous amounts of rain to undo this. And that's why a drier October and November forecast would be very problematic for this area with respect to the hydrology and the worry about drought for next year. In terms of fall field work, it's a balance, right? We're trying to balance the reality of the dry soil with the ease of getting a crop to dry down and harvest. So there's always multiple aspects to this, but this is very dry, and the Mississippi only made that little blip right there in recovery as Francine came through. And we're back down this morning to 7.5 feet below low stage at Memphis, where all those rivers come together. Okay, as we stretch this out over the next week, as I mentioned, the low that's in California is eventually going to ride over the top of this front, increasing rainfall in this area. The newest forecasts, though, have improved rainfall forecast across one of our driest spots in the country late this summer into fall, which is this part of Ohio, West Virginia, and Pennsylvania. And you do see increased chances of precip getting into the Northeast as well, another one of our dry spots. It has been pretty well advertised that a larger area here is going to go over pretty dry. We still have a big section of our cotton belt that's missing out on some of this rainfall as well. Now, this region in through here, not a problem to miss out on a little bit of this rain in the near term, but the temperatures are going to be cranking back up in the lower Mississippi River Valley. We got to pay attention to that pretty carefully too. Now, this is just our next 7 days, and as you know, after the 26th, the 26th, 27th, 28th, we are going to be watching for something to come out of the Caribbean. And the National Hurricane Center, let's see if they got a new update. Good, they did. They still kept this at about a 40% chance of developing. And I think it's really important that I'm clear about this because I've been talking about it since Monday. And, we've been alluding to the fact that there should be some development. And when you just hear me go on and on and on about it, I don't want that to kind of cloud your thought process on the likelihood of it developing, okay? Because while we continue to see the chances of that happening, this is not a slam dunk gonna happen type thing. So let me show you what I mean. Okay, watch this trough first. What we're gonna do is we're gonna watch that one move over the Four Corners states and slide by the weekend along the front. So it's right in through there. This is what's promoting that weekend precipitation in this area. It's being helped along by a pair of weaker troughs to the north, farther to the, pulling this thing farther to the east. And there is a ridge that's right here that's going to spin up and start to draw some of that moisture in out ahead of it. Now that ridge lives over much of the south here, and that's why it's drier in that area. As we play forward to next Wednesday, the trough that was in Canada, as I mentioned, kind of comes in and helps reinforce the rainfall, pushing this a bit farther to the east, which is what's filled in some of those gaps we saw farther to the east. But behind this, by next week, already a big warm-up. So what's interesting is cold Montana followed by big warm-up by mid-next week. But we still see the same things, right? We've been talking about these for weeks, these troughs coming out of Alaska into the Pacific Northwest. And what's interesting about this, if I just go back and forth here, is it's the 26th, 27th, and 28th that we could still see the interaction between this low and that feature coming out of the Caribbean or out of Central America and possibly hit somewhere along the Gulf Coast. I mean, we're still out here 180 hours in the forecast. This is next Friday that we're looking at. And just need to be paying attention to the fact that that could still be one of the possible solutions. I would just say if I'm along the Gulf Coast, especially more toward Alabama, Florida, Georgia, that would be the current area, plus running this up along the East Coast, that I'm most concerned about this tropical system maybe kind of pulling some of its moisture. I have no idea on the strength of it. No one does. As we play this out beyond that, let's go all the way out to 10 days. We still have another reinforcing trough, somewhere here in the Gulf of Alaska. The model's been very consistent about that. But the temperatures toward the end of the month could rebound until we get into early October. And you've known that the artificial intelligence forecast model, which I think has been doing the best at picking up on the pattern, it has dropped another low over the Great Lakes. And these are the kinds of lows, again, right at the beginning of October, that have the ability to drop those temperatures down, bringing in the clear skies on the back side of it, where high pressure tries to fill this in and just gives you those early frosts in the morning. So we're going to pay attention to that, but that's the first week of October. That's the kind of time frame over this. And we'll watch all weekend long to see if that trends in one direction or another. Okay, from here, I want to show you the all hazards weather map. So remember, we are working our way toward the equinox, so it would make sense that this would be the time of, actually, when is the equinox? Is it today? Fall equinox 2024. Oh, it's Sunday. Okay, that's what I thought. I thought it was Sunday, or I thought it was later. I didn't think it was on the 20th this go around. Okay, where was I? Sorry. So it's that time of year that we're going to be losing daylight hours pretty rapidly, making those frost events more possible. In fact, we have a freeze warning out for parts of northern Washington and northern Idaho right now. Stronger winds here, red flag warning, a couple of areas where we're dealing with some air quality, as you've seen through here, and some heat coming back into the southern plains. We talked a bit about that. We will watch for some snow along the Rockies here, and let's get into this and see where our storms are going to be today. Storm Prediction Center this morning highlighted a couple of areas with greater risks. So this is up to a marginal risk as the frontal boundary kind of stretches through parts of Michigan all the way back down just south of St. Louis here, getting into southern Missouri, and then another area back into Kansas. Tomorrow, again, the low's coming out like this. The ridge is coming around like that. And so we're getting what looks like a ridge riding storm event pushing up against a frontal boundary. And even out there, oops, I'm sorry. Forgive me, I got those backwards. I clicked them the wrong direction. This is tomorrow, okay? That's where this all begins. So the low's coming out. There's the ridge, okay? And then we get into, there we are, day 3. That's when the ridge is sitting here. Storms are running up on the front behind it. Sorry about that. Okay, you'll be able to see it all clearly when I show you the high-res NAM. So as we play this forward, we can see some of that light rain still on the front here, getting into Michigan, Indiana, Ohio this morning. The front drapes right back into this area, and you'll watch right here. So there's the ridge, here's the trough, and it's going to sit right in this area. Meanwhile, another low. Remember, we had the weaker wave that's going to push this off to the east, coming through parts of southern Saskatchewan into Montana and northeastern Montana, and getting into North Dakota. This again would be Friday night into Saturday morning. We then play this throughout the day on Saturday and watch the flow coming around. There it is. See the low coming out of the Four Corner States? This is when we could get some snow at high elevation. We're going to watch one low get all the way over to parts of Ontario. Frontal boundaries here, and the forecast models on Sunday are really quite generous with the rainfall in Colorado into southern parts of Nebraska, southern Iowa, northern half, almost northern and western half of Kansas, and pushing this rainfall right through Illinois into Indiana. And that's just as far as this model goes. So we need to look out there a bit farther with some of our other models and try to assess how this is going to play out and then what's going to come out of the tropics. So remember, this is all ahead of when we're going to see the development of something coming in this direction. And the latest European model did try to give us a better hint that this might be the preferred corridor toward which whatever comes out of the tropics, be it just the moisture or be it an actual low pressure system, where it's going to go. So let's wrap all of this up in a sequence of maps. We're going to use those that go out at least 10 days. We're going to show you the national blend of models first, and we're just going to get an idea on the total amount of precipitation that could come from this. So if you rock back and forth, this is Saturday into Sunday. That's Saturday into Sunday. Adding on Monday and Tuesday, this is where we start to get better chances Monday and Tuesday of spreading that rain into some very dry parts of the eastern Corn Belt. I would look at these rainfall totals right now and be very skeptical. When you have such dry conditions ahead of an event, the atmosphere can just steal this. And even if we do get an inch out of this, so much of that is going to, 1, evaporate relatively quickly, 2, soak in to what is already extremely dry soil, and it's not going to feel like an inch event because the ground is not prepared for it. So then we go out there to next Thursday and Friday, and now you can see where the NBM, the National Blend of Models, is taking that tropical moisture. This is the 27th, 28th, and 29th. It's bringing it into Florida. Now you can also very quickly find the drier areas. Let's flip models over to the artificial intelligence. Adding things up again. Very similar timing, Saturday through Monday for a broad sector here in the middle part of the United States. We then see the AIFS next Thursday, Friday, attempting to take whatever comes out of the tropics and go right over the spine of the Appalachian Mountains. It's a much more aggressive model on the development of that system. See how it's already here by next Thursday and spreading its moisture farther to the north? And this is this model that's set up that just drags all of this clear into the northeast. And that's what the AI has been doing all week long. So we're just going to look at it and use it as a piece of information here. Does the GFS agree? Well, here is this morning's GFS run. Same on the timing of the moisture from the midsection of the country to the eastern Corn Belt. Here we are next Thursday into Friday. You can see it's trying to take whatever that feature is right toward the panhandle of Florida, maybe closer to Mobile, Alabama, and then it also takes it toward the Appalachian Mountains, but spreads it a bit more on the eastern side of the Appalachian Mountains. So that would be its 10-11 day forecast, getting us out there to October 1st. Let's now go look at the HRES. This is the high-resolution European model. Very similar on the precip forecast in the midsection of the country. But the high-res European model, this is out there on the 29th. That would be 3 days later than the other models, is trying to bring this thing forward. So you can still see how much uncertainty there is. But the HRES, the high-resolution European, is much more generous with this moisture coming out of Ohio into West Virginia, Pennsylvania, and New York in this particular pattern. All right, 2 more to go. This would be the European ensemble. Similar timing, but much larger model spread on whatever is coming out of the Gulf of Mexico here. So much does not have a solid picture on it when you average all of the runs together. And the GFS ensemble. Now with 31 members, more of them are attempting to take whatever this is late next week and bring it into this area. So I thought it was just good to look at all of this. Remember, you can see all of these maps together on agweather.com and play around with them and look at them yourself. And we are going to do another update on the website this weekend. No change in the format, no change in the structure, but a bit of a change in the format to make it a little more user-friendly on mobile devices as well. Okay, there is snow. And you notice, remember, as that low comes out of California into Colorado on Saturday night and Sunday morning, high elevation, we could be picking up, some decent snowfall amounts here. All right. From here, I do also want to mention the winds, because we still have some strong winds in the plains today. Notice that showed up pretty quickly there. That would be tonight, today into tomorrow morning, so some stronger winds here. And as we just play this out, remember, it is the GFS that takes this right into, this part of Florida and Alabama, and it's doing so with some pretty strong winds, suggesting, a pretty potent system here. But I just want to take note that this corridor, as we work our way into fall, continues to show up quite windy in each forecast. All right, how about some probability maps? This is the chance of getting an inch over the next 10 days from the European model, remembering that it is the European that is not capturing this. The European ensemble is not capturing the tropical system very well. But it has now gone for parts of Iowa, Missouri, sections of Kansas, into Illinois, Indiana, and parts of Ohio, Pennsylvania, and West Virginia. It now has an area in here that has a better than 90% chance of getting an inch. And for some folks, this is like desperately, desperately needed rainfall. On the drier side of this, let's let the new model come in here, go back to the old real quick. Help if I clicked on it. And stretch you out. There we go. We can now see the drier corridor from the northwest plains of Wyoming getting into Montana and stretching all the way back over here to the upper Midwest is drier. And like we said, that part of the cotton belt's drier, just underneath the presence of that bigger ridge, not getting a lot of moisture in that area. The west, because of some ridging returning and some heat returning, we're going to see some drier conditions there as well. Okay, where are we taking this from here? Let's now get out there and just look purely at week 2. These are the 4 maps across the top: CPC, European model, artificial intelligence, GFS. Now what you'll note is that when we look at model blends, they've all got wetter conditions here. When we look at the individual run, which is what the artificial intelligence, it's more aggressive on the solution of a particular low. But what is clear in the models is much drier in this corridor following, and also dry in the southern plains as well, although the Europeans got something in here. So just something to look at. Pay attention to these maps all weekend long. Again, you can just go to them right when you land on agweather.com. Look over here on the sidebar, click on 8 to 14 day precipitation. They'll show up right across the top. Next, let's talk about temperatures. I am going to do a redesign in this map, make it regional, put county outlines so you can kind of zoom in and see it. I think it's one of our better frost potential forecasts from the NDFD. This is now starting to show more widespread frost event coming in here to parts of Montana and western Dakotas with the colder air that's coming through. Now, the Midwest Regional Climate Center, as I've showed you before, does have its average first fall freeze date tool. And again, you probably already have this bookmarked because I sent it to you a couple weeks ago. But what's nice about this is, it's a bit of a tricky website to use. There we go. Is you can kind of hover over any county and have a quick look. Now, you know that I'm worried about maybe the first couple of days of October having a frost event here. That would actually be about a week later than average. In some places here, we've already had a frost event. Remember, this happened, gosh, when was that? 3 weeks ago? But it's just a great tool to kind of look and just understand that as we get into early October, we're now talking about normal frost events. Unfortunately, because this is from the Midwest Regional Climate Center, it doesn't have data from Montana and farther to the north and west. But this is what I'm concerned about. It'll be Sunday morning. The minimum temperatures here, several areas where we're going to be dropping down into the mid to upper 30s, and a couple of places we're going to expect some patchy frost out of this. On the high temperature side of it, here's today's highs. Getting into Saturday. So there's the cool down Saturday. The cool morning on Sunday will warm back up into the 70s. But this is when the low is leaving Colorado, spreading along that frontal boundary, which is very clear to see here. There's where the ridge will have influence. The low came out and it's sitting here, and all that flow is going over the top of it. So this is cloud cover driven and cool. This is now getting into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. Look at the warmth coming back into the west by next week. Much warmer conditions. And if you look at that day 5 through 10, which are these middle 2 maps, again, another big push of warm conditions. But as we note, getting into the beginning of October, we will watch out for some cooler air to slide into this area. And we can see that in the day 10 through 15 maps, which are over here on the right. All right, that's a lot of stuff we've covered. I still got quite a bit more for you because we got to get out there into the sub-seasonal forecast. The new CPC update for October I found to be quite interesting because it's not a La Niña look, even though I think La Niña is showing up quite a bit. I imagine when they were producing this, they were looking like we've been looking at the movement of the MJO. Remember, we talked about that a few times this week. So just take note of what they've got. They've got warmer in the southwest, warmer in the northeast, big drier area here, wetter along the coast and wetter in the northwest. What's interesting is you'd get that pattern if the MJO, by the time we start October, does make its way over here to like phase 8 and especially into phase 1. And if it stays back over here in phase 1, because phase 1 typically looks like this. So what do we end up getting at? So I think they may have used this a lot in their reasoning. If you end up getting troughs here, they dig into the northwest, keeping the northwest wet. You tend to then drop a trough over the Great Lakes. It brings in cooler conditions here and wetter conditions into the northeast. But what this does is it brings in a bit drier air here that's funneling around the bigger ridge over the south and west, which is where it's going to be warm. So that pattern mimics this forecast perfectly. So I'm imagining that they were using a lot of MJO in their analysis. Now, why am I not? The only reason why I'm not is because I've seen it move too much. It came quickly through phase 4 and 5. It moved quickly through 6 into 7. And, where should the MJO be if La Niña develops? It probably wants to collapse and come back out over here. And I'm basing that almost entirely off of the fact that we've continued to see, plenty of strong trade winds in this area, a lot of cool water surfacing, and it seems to be the more dominant signal as we work our way toward autumn that La Niña is going to be there. In fact, this morning, the ocean temperatures in the middle of the equatorial Pacific right here, which is called Niña region 3.4, were down to minus 1.07, so almost minus 1.1. That's a pretty substantial drop-off here in the last couple of months. Now, if we just said, well, what does that mean? What that typically means for October is a little different from what you just saw. Okay, so when you look at this map, just stick with me here. I know it's long in a video. This is a correlation map. So these colors, sorry about that, represent the correlation with ocean temperatures. Now, you have to let your mind take the inverse of this because we're in La Niña. And I'm looking at the correlation with ocean temperatures and that Niña region 3.4, where they're cool. So if these colors are cool, that actually represents more mild weather in the forecast. So we'd expect cool northwest, maybe a little cooler along the Gulf Coast, but mild here. And what often happens as La Niña develops is the way October ends up looking is almost always different from November. So watch this. If we flip over to November, you will see that the forecast now goes, look at this. This would be cooler across the northern tier, and then more warm down south. See that? So you got to flip the colors in your head because I can't do it down here. And then what happens is if La Niña dominates, December comes in. Watch this. You'll see the cooler colors show up here and the warmer there. So that means cooler across the northern tier of the United States for December. Now, I know there are some forecasts out there that don't look anything like this. I am purely showing you the La Niña only correlation maps. And they're not super strong. They're up here 0.3, 0.4, 0.5. But, this would be cooler. Yes, the colors are warm, but it'd be cooler. We'd be warmer down in the southwest. Now, given that La Niña, I think, is more of a factor going forward, it makes sense that the European model, just going back to October, looks like this, right? And that the precipitation pattern continues to show dry. That is very characteristic of October if La Niña is dominating. So we will have to watch. October is a transition month. It's kind of our first full month of autumn weather, and we expect it to be volatile. That's how Octobers typically are, with respect to temperature especially. All right, so my last couple of slides. We got new data here from the Climate Prediction Center, and this is their new forecast for September, October, November. And I want to get into the actual data. So I'm going to click on 3-month outlook, and you're actually taken to the model data here. So let's look at precip. That is their October, November, December probability map. So dry across the south, wet northwest, wet around the Great Lakes and east. November, December, January, they have gone just continually with a La Niña looking forecast, which is drier south, mild south, cooler, snowier early in the northwest, more systems curling through the Great Lakes. December, January, February, that is as La Niña as you can ask for. And their last 3 forecasts have looked like this. This is a weak subtropical jet and a much more variable North Pacific jet that will likely exit after entering the northwest here. So the Ohio River Valley could be wet, icy, snowy, could be a very interesting winter based on this. And speaking of that, let's go look at the temperatures. You notice that it's trying to keep things more mild to the south and much cooler to the north. And I think it was last week I showed this to you, but remember, this forecast system last year had these colors flip-flopped because it was an El Nino last year. Okay, let's wrap this one up. I want to show you some global data here. Still, overall drier in Eastern Europe, Western Russia. Very wet across parts of Southeast Asia. Australia continuing to get big-time moisture. Take a look at down here, in southern Brazil and Argentina. Got to watch that area carefully because the atmosphere is finally beginning to show some signs of a monsoon. Now, what am I talking about? This weekend, see this flow? That is getting close. If this came up just a little bit higher and came down like that, dragging in some of this moisture from the north, we'd have an onset of the monsoon. But as it stands, we still have too much dry air in place here to overcome the moisture flow, and it's just there's not much precipitation forecast here at all. If you just look over the next 10 days, the monsoon's not yet going, but very wet down here across the south. Still seeing that in the forecast. Now, one last map to show, and it's this one here, which just looks out over the month of October. We're looking for consistency in the European model, and another day and another update. And October rainfall, when 80% of the soybeans should be planted, is still above normal, meaning we're going to take the dryness that's there now and replace it soon. So if that verifies, that's very, very important for planting pace in South America. But I'll stop here. Hey, thanks for hanging out with me. I know it was a long video, but we had a lot to cover. So I'll think more about this over the weekend, and we'll talk next week. Thanks.